Right, okay, a bit of an introduction. As it says there, in-person meetings may still be possible under the regulations, but there is a very clear message from the government and the devolved administrations to minimise indoor meetings and gatherings as much as possible. We've all seen the ever-changing news. What we need to look at is the pros and cons of doing things differently. So we have I've done a few pros and cons there of an online meeting. I'm tending to base things around Zoom because it does seem to be a popular solution, and I think it works reasonably well. Right, so some of the pros, as you can see, potentially you can engage with more of your members at the general meeting. They don't have to go out on a cold, wet, windy night, which is what we tend to get for AGM season, isn't it? With a lot more flexibility in terms of you're not tied to having to book a venue or anything like that, so you can pick the times that's most convenient for you. Obviously, the risks associated with COVID-19 virus transmission are reduced because people are doing this from home. If you get it right, it's likely to be a much shorter and a more focused meeting than you would normally get. And of course, if it develops into a bun fight, they've got to throw it a lot further the buns to hit you, haven't they? The cons is more really to do with the people's confidence using IT. And of course the reliability of your broadband. If you're doing an online meeting, if you've got terrible broadband and you live out in the sticks, it can be difficult. It may require a bit of a change to your agenda and how you do things, and it can limit two-way discussion a little bit. But having said that, we're using webinar tonight. The Zoom meetings, I'm finding for meetings of under 20, it works. It's almost the same as being there face to face, in my view. So that's only a little con in my view. So the pros and cons of in-person meetings. Pros, they tend to be familiar territory, to most people because you've been doing it for years and years. Some people do find the discussions easier when they're face to face, but I think that's probably a case of just getting used to it. Obviously, a face-to-face meeting is much easier to involve those, the technophobes and those that are less confident using IT. What we have to remember, though, is that the majority of people that are likely to have issues in joining a Zoom meeting are probably the most vulnerable people that we have as the membership, the older ones who are at greater risk if they do catch the virus. So, while it's down there as a pro, it's also a con, is that one. The cons are that we obviously have to comply with the government guidelines, which are changing on a regular basis. If you're going to book a venue for an AGM, you may suddenly find out that you can't have it anyway. It could change at very short notice. You've got to do your track and trace protocol. Obviously, the travel and transport limitations. I think the recommendation is if you're in the highest risk areas that you don't make unnecessary journeys. And of course, some individuals may not want to attend an in-person meeting at the moment, if they're more vulnerable. So we recommend quite strongly that if you're holding an AGM, it should be held online this year. I think we need to be, well, I'm sure we all are taking the pandemic seriously, but we need to do things differently this year. I think it's the most responsible and safe thing to do under the current circumstances. So if you're running an online AGM, first thing, choose an online platform. You need to set the agenda, promote your AGM, and then there's various bits of housekeeping that you need to be aware of, note taking for producing minutes, and of course, a method for your voting. I'm going to primarily talk about Zoom because I'm getting quite familiar with it and it seems to work well. It's a good option because it allows up to 100 people to join the meeting. So that would probably cover most clubs' AGM attendance. You know, some of the bigger clubs might struggle if they happen to suddenly want everybody to attend. The only drawback of the free package is that you only get 40 minutes. And if all goes well, you can have an AGM in 40 minutes if you've got it planned. But a pro license, which will allow you to have as long as you want, is only $11.99 a month. And you can still have your 100 people on there. No time limit at all for the meetings. The good thing about the Zoom, where it's generally an annual subscription, it's an annual subscription that can be paid monthly and can be cancelled at any point. So you could just take out a Zoom license for 1 month, cost you $11.99. I believe that's plus VAT, and then cancel it after your AGM. What I would highly recommend is whatever online platform you want to go with, run a practice session ahead of the AGM. Okay. Right, so setting the agenda, obviously your AGM hopefully is a fairly fixed agenda, and you need to cover the usual things that you do every year, which is, you know, there's a list there: matters arising, presentation and approval of reports and accounts, your election of committee members, your setting of your subscriptions and discussion of any proposals that you've got. It's probably a good idea to have some other informal activity alongside just to keep things entertaining. You know, potentially have a guest speaker, but obviously you don't want them there for too long, 10, 15 minutes. Or you could do yourselves a quiz. All very easy to do using Zoom. And if you've got any other bits and pieces to do, if you want to recognise any contributions from club members through the year. So it's not all business, something to consider. Of course, once you've decided how you're going to host your AGM, you need to let everybody know. All self-explanatory. Drop them all an email, send them a letter. Including that very clear guidance on how to join online. I suggest it's worth asking people to pre-register. You'll notice you had to for this webinar and for any of the others. You know, we always have them pre-registered so we've an idea how many are attending. There is a Zoom provide registration facilities. You will have, for this one, you were all directed to a link to do on Zoom. So that's quite useful. Hang on, let me find myself now. Yeah, housekeeping, note taking. At the start, let everybody know what functions are available. For example, the raising hand function, which we've all, or most people have used today. The chat box, it's a very useful thing to have. You'll probably use Zoom meeting and rather than Zoom webinar. So I think, and those that have been on some of the other Zoom meetings we've done over the past 6 months, will realise that we ask everybody to mute themselves. It just stops feedback and various other noises, the TV. We don't get to hear you being told off by the wife or anything like that then. But yeah, mute everybody muted unless they need to speak, and then it makes everything run a lot smoother. An advantage of the online AGM is that you can record the meeting and save the chat box. I believe that's only if you've got a paid for subscription on Zoom though. So, but what that does at the end of the meeting, you can download it as either a video or just an audio file, and anything that's typed in the chat is saved as well. So it almost produces a record of the meeting for you quite automatically. Right, voting options. There are Zoom, the paid platform, does have a polling function in there, which I've set up one for just so you can see how it works. So I'm just going to launch a quick poll now. Hopefully you should all see this. And if you just like to cast a vote one way or another. All right, hopefully you can see that. Oh, yeah, now there's votes coming in. I can see something slightly different to you. This is telling me that we've currently got 82 people online, that 68 have cast a vote so far, and it gives a breakdown of the voting. So that's very straightforward. Generally, for those, you set them up in advance of the meeting. It's very easy to do. I've got another one that we'll go through a little bit later as well. So that one there, I can, once that's finished, I can share the results. So you can hopefully see that. Yeah, if someone wants to just show that they can see that. Can you see that, Chris? Yeah.
Yes.
Good, excellent, yeah. So you can share your results straight away, which again is quite a useful thing. So that's one way of doing your voting. The question from Bill Scott there, is the polling available on all platforms? Yes, is one of the things I've tried. We set up a meeting and logged in via mobile, and the polling came up on the mobile. So yes, so that's quite a good way of doing your polling. There are easier ways. You could just have, for example, you could use the chat box. So everybody type yes in that. The only problem there is somebody's got to count them. There is a facility on the participants list in Zoom meetings, again, if it's paid, where there's buttons at the bottom and you can click yes and no on that as well. And that's another way of doing voting really quickly. Yeah, okay. And a quick way of doing it is, as it says at the bottom there, you could just say, right, just take a vote for those that are against the proposal, for example, and just ask people to put their hands up if they're against it. So, if you've got a proposal that the vast majority are for, it just makes your administration a lot easier and counting easier. It has various voting options. There's nothing to stop you, of course, voting via email on various bits and pieces. Stuart, you just put your hand up then and then put it down again. Did you have something to add? Stuart Willis? It's disappeared on me. If you put your hand up again, I can unmute you, Stuart. Right, Stuart, do you have a point to make?
Just a quick question. When you're ratifying area chief examiners at the AGM, then that's done via a secret ballot. Any thoughts on that? I mean, we've never had an issue before, but it is part of the area ACE ratification, and I believe there was a change. It should be by secret ballot. So I just wondered if you any thoughts on that.
Yeah, it should be by secret ballot. The poll that I put up earlier, when you create those, there is an option to make them anonymous. So they can be completely anonymous.
Okay, same as we use for the council meetings.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
You can, with a little bit of practice, create those polls on the fly fairly quickly. But this is why you perhaps need to have a few dry runs beforehand. certainly our area, or my area, the Northern area, who generally do it as a block vote for the chief examiners unless there's a specific problem otherwise. But yes, you can have those votes completely anonymously if required. Okay.
Okay, thanks.
No problem. Right, so that's, as I say, the voting options covered there. We, as I say, you could do it just by people raising their hands. You could do an email vote as well. You don't necessarily have to use a platform like Zoom, but as I say, there are a number of options available. The BMFA AGM this year, or the Society AGM, that's going to be held as a Zoom webinar on the 14th of November. I'm hoping this year we have a really good turnout, actually. It would be really nice to have more clubs represented. So hopefully you will prod whoever's required at your club to make sure your club's represented. Going back to the polling, I did create another one because you can have multiple questions in a poll as well. So going back to what Stuart was saying about ratifying chief examiners, you could set up a poll for each individual. So I'm going to launch one now, which is a multi-question poll. If you'd like all to fill that in for me. There you go. Hopefully you can see that. Nobody's pressed anything yet. Yeah, we go. That is quite good. We've got 73 of 83 voted so far, so it's from a management point of view, for whoever's hosting your meeting, it is quite good. One thing you do need to be aware of on this is that whoever is your meeting host can't vote in any of these. So I would suggest you make it your chairman. Then he can just cast a casting vote if required, or just get a somebody who doesn't vote to act as the host for the meeting. Okay. So I shall end that poll there. 74 out of 83 of you have voted on that. Just share those results as a matter of interest. So hopefully we'll have a good turnout there then at this year's AGM. Just go to that link there, agm.bmfa.uk, and the club secretaries really need to do it and register whoever the person is that's going to be attending, and they'll be emailed all the information they need then. For that. So that's pretty much all I've got in terms of slides. So I'll try and go through. We've got a number of open questions here. Right, there's a comment there from Stuart Willis. South East area's got a Zoom license. Any club can book via the area to use it, so that's useful. I think that's an excellent idea, and I would strongly recommend all the other areas take out the license. Right, John, I think a couple of people have mentioned this. Cover the concept of not having an AGM this year. That is really up to you as a club. There is the government did introduce legislation that allowed those that legally have to have an AGM to postpone them and delay them. Initially, it was so they could delay them for three months, but obviously the pandemic's going on a lot longer than I think everybody hoped, so that will no doubt be extended. Much will depend on your constitution. I think if you have something in your constitution that says you must have an AGM at a certain time of year, you would need to, I think, at least have an email vote or something for all the members to say they want to either postpone it. But we have to accept and do what's reasonable with anything. So I don't think there's any issue in you postponing your AGM till the spring, but get your members' agreement. What the last thing you want to do is just decide, amongst the committee that you're going to do that, and then all the members don't agree with you. Okay. So I'm trying to work down through these. So I think what have we got here? Any that I don't answer of your questions, I will get back to you after the meeting. Yes, I'll be sending the slides out for both this short presentation, but also the Club Plus one. Yes, there's a few comments rather than questions in there. Yeah, there are a few saying you've older members without computers, so they could not join an online AGM. It's something that all clubs are going to have to consider, but equally, a lot of the older ones, they are vulnerable. They perhaps shouldn't really be joining a face-to-face meeting either. So, you've got to consider all aspects of this. It's a reasonable thing to do is to hold your AGM online in the current crisis that we've got. Unless you can have it outside, as Martin Jones has just put in the chat box there. The difficulty, I suppose, is the weather and the reliability of it at this time of year. But it is something you should be consulting your members about. It may well be that if you've nothing too controversial in your AGM, that doing it via Zoom that some people aren't going to be able to attend is not too unreasonable. You can actually dial into a Zoom meeting from an ordinary phone line, so people can join that way. They won't have the voting facilities. And the other thing you could also set up is proxy voting. That's not an unreasonable thing to do. Okay. Got a question here. How many members are in the largest club? Back when I was the secretary at Pontefract, that was one of the largest clubs and had about 230. I think Ramsey Club are quite big. So there are clubs with up to 200 members in. So, Colleen Brown, I think I've answered your question there. Yes, members can join via the phone. Okay. I think I've got most of those. Right. If anyone would like to raise a hand if they've got a question, and then I'll bring you in and you can actually ask it that way. So we've got Wayne Broom. Hi Wayne, do you want to ask away?
Yeah, good evening, Andy. What we've done, it might help others, is we've pre-organised the fact that we've emailed every member in the club to vote for their committee as for next year.
Yeah. It's a good thing to be doing. However you're holding the meeting, whether it's via email or via Zoom, I think sending out things like reports and the accounts that in advance of it is a very good idea to so people are aware of it beforehand, and then if you do hold it as a Zoom meeting, you're not having to go through it line by line. The treasurers, everybody's got them, and you've got to assume that they will have read them. But yeah, doing a meeting via email, it's perfectly acceptable in the current situation, I think. Right, Robin, Strange, you've got a point to make? You there, Robin? You need to
Can you hear me now, Andy?
Yes, we can hear you now, yeah.
Right, lovely. I was merrily talking to myself there. Yeah, in recent months, we've been holding our committee meetings using Skype, which has worked very well, including voting. And last weekend, I attended an AGM for an advanced motorcycle group, which I'm in. And this last week, I attended a meeting, a monthly meeting for the local University of the Third Age, which by default is a lot of old codgers. And in all instances, it's worked very well.
Excellent.
In the U3A meeting, we had about 55 people attended the meeting, which went on for about 2 hours. And the AGM, the way it was organised was that all the questions that were going to come up were distributed beforehand with the documents like the accounts and all this sort of stuff. The main thing I would say is that you do need somebody strong to actually manage the meeting.
Yes.
And the only criticism that came out of it from everybody was that it was not quite as friendly from the perspective that you couldn't go and have a chat with somebody before and after the meeting. But from doing a business perspective, it worked very well.
Yeah.
And the voting, in that instance, I think we had about 30 odd people in the out of about 150 attended the AGM. And no, the experience was very good. But seeing as people couldn't go and chat to each other quite so easily, the meeting actually ended up being a lot rather quicker.
Yes, I think that is one of the benefits, I think. So, you know, I think it would be a lot more focused.
Yeah.
And I think there is a certain fear of doing things differently. I do think that it's not really a valid fear really anymore. It is quite simple. I'm just sharing the screen. I think it is quite an easy thing to use, but as I say, I do think it's worth having practice runs before. If you're going to consider your AGM via Zoom for the first time, I would suggest having a couple of club meetings beforehand. Do a club quiz, something like that, just to get people used to it. And then you can, you know, from there, once everybody's had a go, I think they'll find it quite easy. We've had the board meetings, the Beam Affair board meetings have been done. The last 3, I think, have been on Zoom. And there are a few technophobes involved, but I don't think anybody's had any issues. I think your only people that are going to have a really struggle is those without the IT equipment. I think they'll find that they can go quite well. Right, with Bill Scott, you've got your hand up. Would you like to say something?
Yeah, I was just going back to the polls again, Andy. Is it only the host that can see that, or can you allocate it maybe to the club secretary as well so that he can see the results as they come in?
Well, you can announce the results like I did on both of those. That's one option. But you can set up a co-host and they can see them.
Okay, grand, thanks.
Yeah, I think the only thing you've got to be a little bit careful of is hosts generally can't vote. So you need to be a little bit careful on that, because if you have...
host might not be able to vote either then, yeah.
Yeah, that's the only thing I would suggest watch on that. But you can share them afterwards. And it does Zoom does give you a report afterwards as well, so you can download the votes.
Okay, thanks.
Anybody else, any questions? No? Either put your hand up or type it in the question box.
Andy.
Chris, yes.
I've got a question regarding the I think it was Southeast buying Zoom for the area. When it comes to be used by the club secretaries, can they any club in that area use it? And does a a member of South Eastern have to be on the meeting?
I mean, we've used our BMFA account for specialist bodies and area meetings. Generally, I try and be available for the start of the meeting, so I can pass the hosting privileges to whoever needs them for the meeting. But if I'm not available, they can still have the meeting as long as it's been set up not using the waiting room feature. Zoom has this waiting room feature, so if anybody wants to join before the host is there, they can be put in a waiting room and then the host can bring them in. So you need to make sure that the area sets up the meeting for you, but doesn't use the waiting room, because if they haven't got a host there, nobody can get out of the waiting room.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. Right, any more questions? Stuart, go ahead, Stuart.
Yeah, just you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. The way that certainly we're running it here is that we're allowing clubs to hold committee meetings as well as their AGM. And what I've done is I've set it up, and I'm getting the secretary to request the meeting. I then send the link to the secretary to send out to whoever wants to join, like the committee. I've said that I will then be on at 7:15 if it's 7:30 meeting to hand over the meeting to the secretary or the chairman if they want to, but it's booked via myself. And I've also set them up, as Andy said, without the waiting room facility, so they will come in automatically. And we're doing the same for the area. I've had a couple of people that have had questions and issues that I've actually set up test Zoom meetings just between on a one-on-one basis if people have had any problems. I've had a couple of them come through already, sort of thing. But we start the first round next week of various clubs that have got their committee meetings, followed by AGMs after that. So it seems to have gone down quite well. I mean, the area we looked at, we're at the money that we would have spent on hiring the room where you get, sort of 4 or 5 clubs turn up, is actually paying the 140 odd, because it is, as Andy said, it is plus VAT. So the 100, we're actually saving money on the room just by having the Zoom meetings. And I've already had a couple of clubs that have never attended any meetings have requested to attend the AGM and the OGM. So I think it may be the way forward even after COVID, because it just seems more and more, Southeast area is quite a big area and people just don't really want to travel 2 or 3 hours on a cold November evening sort of thing. So it certainly seems to have worked. So, but the initial feedback is pretty good for the area.
I mean, I think Zoom's a good thing for keeping engaged with people, you know. So if your club takes out a Zoom license, and if you have a meeting on Zoom once a month, it's a way of keeping in touch with people. In many respects, a Zoom meeting where everybody's got the camera on, you're pretty much face to face anyway. You just have to get used to seeing all different styles of nose hair, I find, because people tend to have the camera on the laptop looking up the nostrils. But it's it's a different way of doing things, but it allows you to keep that engagement. I mean, we had, I think, 87 online at one point tonight. We've had, over the achievement scheme seminars that we've done, we've had probably 400 or 500 different people attend those in total. So we're finding it very useful for maintaining engagement, and there's no reason why areas and clubs shouldn't benefit the same way. So, I mean, I've done a number of talks using Zoom. It's not the same as being there and standing in front of you all and waffling on, but I can waffle on, sat here in my desk at home. So, I'm happy to do that. So sort of works. So, has anybody else got any specific questions? No, I think I've covered most of them. Now, we did have, I'm just looking for the email. I did forward it to Dave because somebody was asking about how the CAA renewals and everything is going to work. And say we've got David Phipps here, the Chief Executive Officer of the BMFA, who can probably update us a little bit on that. Over to you, Dave.
Evening all. Yeah, so CAA operator renewals, those that rushed to register directly with the CAA when they rolled out the scheme last year, at this moment in time, they will probably have to renew directly with the CAA. The CAA hadn't actually built in a renewal system into their very expensive database. They should have treated themselves to Club Plus, maybe. It would have been a lot more functional for them. So the CAA were working on the basis that originally they weren't going to take any renewals from BMFA members through the BMFA, and everyone would have to register directly with them. They then backtracked on that and said that they'd come up with a system to facilitate it, but it was going to cost £100,000 plus £10,000 a year subscription, which they wanted us to pay for, which obviously we said no. So now they've come up with a system which is at no cost to us. We will be able to take operator registrations through the BMFA membership system, but they weren't working on the basis of renewing anybody until the current operator licenses expired, and everyone that registered through the BMFA, no one has a CAA operator registration that expires before the middle of February. So that's the sort of timescale that they were looking at. So we are pushing them to try and roll it out much more quickly. But at the present time, if you rush to register with them when it first came out last November, you may well have to re-register with them this year. But anyone that registered through the BMFA will be able to register through the BMFA if they prefer. In terms of the cost, there is no change. It's still the £9 that we managed to negotiate down from £16.50 for everybody. Was that it, Andy? Was there any more questions on it? I can't remember.
I think it was primarily the email question that came in was asking whether the renewals could be done through the BMFA if they'd done it initially through the CAA.
So if you register as an operator through the BMFA, you will be able to do that again this year, and we'll be looking to incorporate it into the membership process. But you know, so you'll be able to pay for it and register as part of the membership renewal, but it will not renew until your current license expires. So if you pay your membership subs in December, you'll not be paying your operator subs in December unless you're registering for the first time. If it's to renew your operator subs, it will renew when it expires. So for most people, middle of February.
If anybody's got any questions on there, I'm sort of working my way down the list, allowing you all to speak. So if you've got any specific questions for Dave, if you just unmute yourself, you can ask away.
Oh, the actual amount paid to the CAA, even though it's due in February or March or whenever it is, you're going to have to do a two-payment system next year then?
Not necessarily. It can be incorporated into the membership renewal. It's just that we won't pay the CAA and renew it until your license expires. But then you'll get a further year from that point. So on the
1st of January, we can renew the CAA, even though it's not due till, say...
You can. So if you renew it on the 1st of January, if someone's operator ID expires in the middle of February or the middle of April, whatever, it's at that point that it'll be renewed.
Right, okay. Fine, thank you.
Will we have to change our operator license?
Yes, because the EU regulations come into effect on the 31st of December and the operator number format is different. It's a 12-digit alphanumeric code. But once you've got your new operator ID, you should retain that then into the future. If you rush to register when it first came out last November, you may well keep your current operator ID. You may well get a different one, but in the existing format, but you'll not get one of the new ones until you register the year after.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.